Hey, this is Beatles60. I'm Andy.
And I'm Larry. We ain't jumping around. Well, today we're jumping back briefly to the end of 1961.
Here's something a little unusual.
Yeah, a little unusual. In this episode, we'll revisit the voicemail we received from someone you'll all know. After that, dear listeners, we'll give you a little inside look at our historiographic methods. You know our tagline, we ain't jumping around, right? We ain't jumping around. In fact, the podcast does jump around in time a little bit. We look back 60 plus years to say 1961 or 62, and we do jump ahead to preview the unfolding of late 1963 to early 64. That's true. We jump a little in the podcast. The tagline is more applicable to the Facebook group, a few thousand people who together share images, music, and info from exactly 60 years ago each day. So it just continues 60 years ago, the next day, the next day, the next day. It's like following a real-life soap opera from 1963. But you've probably heard me talking about a longitudinal, phenomenological, historiographic study. And Andy is scripted to call it highfalutin academic mumbo-jumbo. It's a fine line, our marking a new 60th anniversary of whatever every day. Sounds celebratory. Hey, 60 years since this record. Woohoo! But the group's real mission, the real value, is more scholarly than celebratory. You wouldn't know it because, I don't know, sometimes we are celebrating. However, we know that the insights we gained from immersing ourselves in that 1963 universe don't give us like a privileged perspective necessarily. I mean, come on, it's limited. In the wide world of historical research, we're just people who really know a lot about the sequence of the Beatles story. We really know this happened before that happened, It's a humble role, but we perform it confidently because we don't jump around. And when I say we, I mean everybody in the B60 group online. Whew, long introduction here. Hey Andy, let's play our theme music, and then a surprise guest phones in a voicemail for Beatles60. After that, Andy's going to ask me to unpack the highfalutin terminology. Woohoo, that's going to be fun. No, really, it is. It should be fun, so we'll be right back.
60. Beatles60, we ain't jumping around.
In Larry Kane's book, When They Were Boys, he talks about the Beatles' first formal meeting in Brian's office. He writes, "The deal meeting was on December 3rd, 1961. Paul was taking a bath and arrived 70 minutes late. His nonchalance about the first business meeting was never explained, but after calling Paul at home, and Paul telling Epstein he was in the bath, the sometimes intensely serious businessman replied, 'He's quite late.' George responded, 'Yes, but he's clean.' We've heard this a billion times. George's humor, in my time with him and throughout his career, was always a relief in tense situations. It's a good point. It's just so well covered, and everybody loves to tell that story. We covered this oft-told story, remember? It was 60 years later at the end of 2021, and jokingly challenged Beatle Paul. And then a couple of weeks later, well, you can go back and hear the episode titled Paul Calls Us to hear the whole thing, but here's part of it. Okay, so here's the message that was left for us by his nibs. 2 episodes back, we were talking about Paul being in the bath when they were all assembled for their important meeting at NEMS.
Yeah, December 3rd, yeah.
And we challenged Paul, current day Paul, to call in and explain why he was deliberately late for the first down-to-business meeting at NEMS with the other Beatles and with Brian. Let's play back the clip from a couple of episodes ago.
Yes.
Here's what happened. The meeting, the December 3rd, that's a Sunday, that meeting was scheduled for 4:30 in the afternoon. John, George, and Pete, they were on time, but Paul wasn't. By around 5:15, Brian asked George to call Paul, see what was going on, and they were told that Paul had just gotten up and was in the bath. He ultimately wouldn't arrive until about 6 o'clock. So why he did that is somewhat of a mystery. Did he just oversleep? Or was he trying to send a message? I'm not going to just dive right in and you're going to see how I can be a pain. I don't know.
Sir Paul McCartney, if you're listening to this podcast, please go to anchor.fm/Beatles60. Leave a message and say, I did it because I was, passive-aggressive?
Possibly.
Tell us what the fuck was going on. Come on, Paul.
John actually always believed that Paul was not really that excited about bringing Brian on, because he does have that tendency to be very conservative.
Oh, remember that one, Andy?
I do remember that. Yeah, it was a good one.
Yeah. Well, this apparently got under Paul's skin. One of our subscribers, who I'm not at liberty to name, you know who you are, though, is connected with a project that Paul's working on at the moment, actually. So she played that for him. I got a call from his assistant. I didn't talk to him, actually. He preferred not to be interviewed. I never got to talk with Paul, but he was willing to leave his response as a voicemail on my old machine that I have here in Osaka. He actually dialed Osaka.
Okay, are we on? Okay, hello Andy and Larry. This is Paul McCartney calling in about when we first met with Brian and why I was a bit late and the story that went round that I was in the bath at the time and how these stories get blown out of proportion. And I think now would be a good time for me to correct them. First of all, I want to say we all love Brian. Okay, Epi, as we knew him. And as to the big question that you've asked, the one that's apparently been hanging round, this was some 60 years ago. Who can remember? Certainly not me. The question is, was he really in the bath for an hour? I don't know. Who can remember? If we've learned anything about the Beatles in 60 years, fellas, it's that time is irrelevant. Really. We were having fun, in those days. But we can't go on these days spreading rumours and expecting people to believe it. Because you just never really know where these stories sort of come from. They're always just sort of appearing out of the mists of time. But now, because of Beatles60 or whatever it is, it's all starting to get a bit cantankerous, really. So I suppose here on the internet, it's easy to sort of get your facts wrong. So luckily, I've found a solution.
Okay, more of his voicemail later in this episode, but if you want to hear the whole thing, you can optionally go to our Beatles60.group website, navigate to podcast episodes, and find the one it's titled Paul Calls Us. We just thought today, of all days, would be an ideal time to drop that voicemail again. We have a new corner in our podcast. This is something new. announcing something new. We're going to call it Sorry, Sorry, Sorry.
Sorry, 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 sorry,
So this is like, if we were in print, this would be called the errata section. These are just mistakes we made, and people, listeners found the following errors in our most recent podcast episode. So now we're going to come clean. Okay, here we go. First of all, musicologist Dave Ribb's domain isn't Beatlebooks.com. No. It's something else. You want to write it down? I'll give you the real domain. You got a pen? Getting a pen. It's this. www.beatlesebooks, all one word, Beatlesebooks.com. That's where you find Dave. And it's really good stuff. It's worth writing down, I'll tell you. Beatlesebooks.com. Okay, I forgot the name of Richard Langham, somebody very important in the Please Please Me album recording story, the session at EMI. He was the tape engineer. So he was up there with George Martin, with Norman Smith, and then there was Richard Langham. So that's his name, Richard Langham. He was, in fact, an important reader for Jude in her book. She made many revisions of the chapter, and he read them for her and was very helpful. So I wanted to give him some respect and give him a name. Richard Langham. Okay, what else is there? In one place, I meant to say 1963, as usual, but it sounded kind of like 53. I'll enunciate better. My bad. Okay, here's a big error. They recorded most of the album on the 11th of February, not the 20th. So that 10-song marathon, somebody in our group said, it wasn't a marathon because they didn't do the entire thing. So 4 of the tracks were already in the can. But no, it was a marathon. They recorded for them. Usually sessions were like 4 hours long at EMI. They scheduled morning and afternoon, but they went until almost midnight. They went over 12 hours. That's a fucking marathon. Okay? It's a marathon. But it wasn't on the 20th. The marathon was on the 11th. On the 20th, it was just George Martin doing some overdubs. The Beatles weren't there. So I have to get facts like that correct, even though I try to read between the facts. Well, you can't read between the facts if you don't get the facts right? So those are the facts. I referred to Revolution 9 as a song. But, it's not, you can't really sing Revolution 9, right? Because it is musique concrète, and it's a sound collage. So, more exactly, we should call it a piece or a sound collage. Okay? Sorry.
sorry, 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 sorry,
We'll be back after this break to talk Beatles60 methodologies. Fun! No, really, it was a pretty good discussion we had in a live talk on the 8th of January, but haven't published until now. And so this is the world debut of this little discussion. Okay, here's some music. We'll be back after this music.
It's Beatles60 Live, we jumping around. I'm Andy, I'm here with Larry, and we're going to be talking today about some very simple concepts, phenomenology and hermeneutics. You know all about those, right? Well, let me admit that the use of these big terms kind of makes my brain go numb. But when I get an explanation, it really makes a lot of sense. So, Larry, this is kind of your area. So how about a short explanation of what we'll be talking about, Lawrence?
I think most listeners kind of know what Beatles60 is about. We like to use highfalutin names for our methodology, but it's, in fact, really straightforward. I'll summarize it in a moment, but my main idea for this episode is to differentiate B60 from the whole process of historical research, that we're a very minor little process within it.
So our 8 jumping around promos, you use the phrase longitudinal, phenomenological, historiographic study. Can you unpack that a bit?
Okay, yeah. Longitudinal just means that we're very focused on the 60 years past timeline. Our social media and podcast material isn't looking at this day in Beatle history, where January jumps from their tour in Scotland in 63, their arguments at Twickenham Studios in 1969, and so on, jumping all over the place. It's not like that, as you know. We're focused in on today, 60 years ago, each day. It's historiographic in that most of us in the B60 community don't perform original historical research, but we kind of do, by digging up old melody makers and things. But we rely on the most confident sources. In our case, you're the one with the 359 books on the topic.
That would be me, yes.
So for each day, we can pull together info from David Ries, Torsten Knoblauch, Mark Lewison, and our guest today, for example. And all we do is sort of virtually experience what was happening each day as like a chronicle or a soap opera. And this brings us to phenomenology, is basically the study of human experience. And hermeneutics came from methods of studying texts, basically methods of interpretation and understanding of contexts other than our own. It started out with ancient texts. Anything can be a text. An interview can be a text, Because we don't jump around and because we immerse ourselves in the context of the time, in many ways on Facebook we're listening to 1963 hits. We're looking at January 1963 disc magazine, NME, Melody Maker, Mersey Beat, and what have you. Looking at film, television, and art of the time, learning all about even the severe weather they had in Britain this time 60 years ago, knowing where the Beatles were last night and where they're headed this afternoon. Today they happen to be on a children's TV show in Glasgow.
Roundup.
Ha-ha. And because of all this, we can walk in their Beatle boots. We can, with better confidence, interpret and understand their time and their experiences. What we might discuss today is our level of confidence in the guesswork involved in this reading between the facts. It's fallible. Sometimes we're confident, sometimes not. But it gives us insights that we share with listeners. Maybe some can use the insights, use them as jumping off points for research. Our role turns out to be like generating insights that suggest further research, what they call heuristic value.
I know what you mean. I think the process does result in some pretty impressive insights. And so how do you explain the insights to our listeners today?
The most useful one that I find isn't unique. I mean, any Beatle expert would echo this, but for me, I don't have many of the books. I have a busy life, but the insights we garner from the longitudinal study, the chronicling, turn out, I've discovered, to be kind of common among experts. That is, I like to focus on conditions, especially sociocultural conditions, but of course, musical trends too, and the way the Beatles were pre-adapted seemingly for each stage of their development. And you call it a big old puzzle, right? Where each incident is a piece, like Paul's girlfriend miscarrying, right?
Or national service ending.
Right. And David Bedford calls it a perfect storm, and I think it's really a strong consensus.
And Kenneth Womack says that nobody does it alone.
The Beatles' adaptability wasn't like Darwinian. There was a great amount of brilliance, perseverance, risk-taking, and charm.
Right. We can't ignore the mania that stemmed from the guys themselves, right? Their humor, determination, taste in music, the songs and artists they chose to cover, their scousiness. their hair, songwriting, manager, producer, record label, and of course, the trousers.
I think it was the trousers.
Now listen, folks. Listen. The number of days between this podcast episode and our next episode will, 60 years ago, have been, wait for it, the exact same number of days.
The Beatles will have experienced the exact same number of days, same time of year. All of you who have been following this timeline with us already get the pace.
You already get it, right? Same speed. Technically, we'd call this a longitudinal phenomenological historiographic study.
Hey, Larry, what's with all this highfalutin terminology?
This is a serious series. Time moves in one pace, in one direction. Last I checked. Obvious, right? At least, that's how we experience time.
Yes, and the Beatles60 Chronicle is all about human experience.
Yep. That's why smart students follow us, along with a linear timeline. We know you're there, hence our slogan.
Come on, folks at home.
Say it with us.
Beatles60, we ain't jumping around.
We ain't jumping around.
Suddenly, the world I used to know, I see it differently. You woke me from a dream, now here's reality. Baby, baby, you are really hurting me. 'Cause every time you tell me I look good and that I'm doing fine, but nothing ever changes. And now I see, baby, you are hurting me. Stuck in repeat. Stop lying. I know you're playing your part, but baby, it's breaking my heart. Is it over? How could I know? If you don't need me, just let me know when I go. Truthfully, the game that you've been playing felt so real to me. I once believed that you could be my destiny. Baby, baby, you are really hurting me. Who is she? How can you reject me so damn easily? Who are you and what are we? Baby, baby, you are really hurting me. I know you're playing your part, but baby, it's breaking my heart. Is it over? How could I know? If you don't need me, just let me know when I go. I know you're playing your part, but baby, it's breaking my heart. Is it over? How could I know? If you don't need me, just let me know. You're leaving your car, got lost in your heart. I'm falling apart. Stop lying. Don't know who you are, baby, anymore. I'm dying. I know you're playing your part, but baby, it's breaking my heart. Is it over? How could I know? If you don't need me, just let me know when I go. I know you're playing your part, 'cause I go, but baby, it's breaking my heart. How could I know? If you don't need me, just let me know when I go.
Andy and Larry appreciate those who listen all through the regular podcast episodes. So we have a new, very cool bonus for you, an exclusive monthly event called Beatles60 Live. The live show is audio, not video. First weekend of every month, membership is free and audio access is free. It's all free and easy. This audio doesn't appear in the normal podcast feed, but you can access it from anywhere in the world by signing up for Beatles60 Live. Once you sign up, you'll see how easy access is. Okay, here's how you find the members page. There's just one simple little trick. See this episode notes. Find the Beatles60.group link. Open that in any browser. To get to the secret live page for members, just add live at the end. So it's Beatles60.group/live. Again, Beatles60.group/live. The first time you get there, you'll have to sign up. It takes just a couple of seconds. Just enter any name and valid email, and you're there. Bob's your uncle. It's that straightforward. Got it? That's Beatles60.group/live. We'll email you in advance of each live so you'll know the exact time to listen, specified in most world time zones. And you'll have a convenient invitation link sent to you privately. You'll find stuff easily using the members-only navigation. Dead simple once you're in. Full live event information is all there. If you have any trouble, just contact Andy. He can give you the link privately or resend the confirmation email or whatever. Members who miss the live event can listen later. We'll archive each one on the Beatles60 Live page. You can just choose a past date, hit the play button, and listen anytime. Hope you can join.
I just want to add that your email address is safe with me. I'm the only one who will email you no more than once a month to announce each event, and it's easy to unsubscribe. You have my word.
Andy is trustworthy. Come and join our little insider community.
Yes.
To get your facts wrong. So luckily I've found a solution to it. I've found this fella Eric Howell, who might help set the record straight. Eric, love, I've just been leaving a message for Beatles60. Can we have a word to set the record straight?
Hi guys, I better fess up to this ruse. Tell all your listeners on Beatles60 that was, in fact, not the voice of Paul McCartney. It was just me, Eric Howell, having a bit of fun. And Andy and Larry asked me to do this. They were in on the gag, so blame them, listeners. But I do Beatle voices, as you just heard, and I enjoy it very much. I have my own podcast called A Day in Their Life, an audio drama of the Beatles story, which is exactly what the name suggests. And I'd love to turn you on to it, to what is essentially, apparently, the world's first and only audio drama of the Beatles story, created and produced by myself with a little help from my friends across the pond in the UK and all the rest of it. Beatledrama.com. But you can subscribe and listen to the fully produced theater of the mind experience in Beatles history, as if you were there. Andy and Larry, thank you for all you do. Thanks for having me on your show. And keep listening, everybody. Peace and love.
We're in 97 megahertz in stereo. And now, a message from our sponsor.
This is Brian, or Epi, as the boys are fond of calling me. And I hope you've enjoyed today's episode of Beatles60. The Beatles, at their heart, are storytellers. And I'd like to invite you to go even deeper into their story by listening to another program called A Day in Their Life, an audio drama of the Beatles story. Both Andy and Lawrence agree. It's simply marvelous. For details, visit Beatledrama.com or see the show notes for this Beatles60 episode for the link. Thank you.
Thank you. Here's our number again, 06122286262, and it's contest time.